Alright everyone, it's time to talk about the legacy media some more. We've actually got two little bits today because Razorfist had a little dust up with CBS, I believe, so I'll be talking about that briefly as well. Evangelocon loser Glenn Beck is continuing to be a loser. Now, he's had problems for some time. He was riding high there, you'll remember, years and years ago. During the George Soros is everything evil period, Glenn Beck was riding high, but eventually after a couple years at Fox, having had one of the highest rated segments, he stopped drawing in any audience because he was a one-trick pony. All he could do was talk about George Soros. Now, I admit that George Soros is a bad hombre myself, but that doesn't mean I'm going to turn my channel into the George Soros Hour, where that's all I ever talk about. Well, that's basically what Glenn Beck did. Then he became a never-Trumper. And that, I think, alienated a lot of the former Tea Partiers that really were fans of the Blaze. The network that he created had already shrunk anyway. Over time is in decline. You look at their YouTube page. Tell me how many subscribers and how many views they have. Now compare that to some of the individuals, not even part of a network. They don't have a company. They have a webcam. Compare it to some individuals who cover politics or social chatter on YouTube alone, as well as plenty of actually independent sites. There's no comparison. The Blaze is like a total afterthought. They were talking about the Daily Wire absorbing them, and apparently that's not going to happen. So Glenn Beck's stuck with basically a worthless company and a few dozen employees. That's what he's got now. Don't feel too sad for him, though. He said years and years ago he was going blind, and he's still apparently able to see. So I guess it was a miracle from the Mormon Jesus on that one. Then at the same time, he made so many millions of dollars just when he was at Fox, but he went in decline there. He forms the Blaze. And at first it's like, oh, you know, this is kind of hip and cool, but it was never independent. It was always just a spin-off of Fox News. It's just Glenn Beck took his Fox persona, exported it to a fucking website, built a little bit of a media empire, so-called, and then when it's in decline, he's trying to sell it for tens of millions of dollars. I don't know why. Just say, hey, we're dissolving. We're no longer going to exist. That's all you have to do. Just do your shitty podcast. Stop being the Blaze or whatever and just be the Glenn Beck podcast. Look, if you can get 10,000 people, and I'm sure Glenn Beck can still scrape that many people together, to give you $1.99 a month or $5.99 a year or something, you're still making out like a bandit, Glenn. You can pay your bills. You're just fine. Don't worry. Start a Patreon page. Why don't you sell some more fucking mugs or something? At least mine are properly made. But no, Glenn Beck is sliding backwards. And as some people will say, well, how can you? Glenn Beck is no longer a never-Trumper. Now he saw the light because of abortion or some fucking stupid issue. No, I am glad because Glenn Beck is part of the Fox spin-off legacy media. It's like Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly has a podcast. Technically, he's making his own independent media. He's still parroting the same neocon nonsense that they drilled into his head anyway at Fox, and that he always believed in. He's not going to be anything but a neocon. Glenn Beck tried to pass himself off as a libertarian. It was like totally laughable. So I'm a libertarian, but I think that we should rescind equal protection, and no, gay is not okay, so we're going to be moralists, and praise Jesus, and if you don't love Jesus, shame on you, so we're going to be like vaguely theocratic. He's not a libertarian. Now, I'm sorry, he's on that moralist side of people who think they're libertarian because they like guns. Just call yourself an Evangelocon, then they love guns. Yeah, I like guns too, but I actually don't want to abuse my fellow citizens, have some comprehension of the concept of individuality. Glenn Beck doesn't. Glenn Beck's just nutty, and did you ever see, though, the bits of footage where he was making, like, crude passes at women on the program? Like that one where he's like, oh, yeah, how about you come back to my office and we'll do a photo shoot later, and the girl there, I don't think she could believe what she was hearing. He's a little bit of a creepy dude, but really it's about talentlessness. Like when he plunged his face into a bowl of Doritos, trying to mimic Donald Trump, he thought this was extremely highbrow comedy. He also thought it was very, very hard-hitting, Jesus-friendly commentary on the political situation. He was a never-Trumper for an entire fucking year. It's like, no, Donald Trump might be the Antichrist. This is the end of the United States. And now all of a sudden he has a hard-on for him because he's realized, oh, yeah, I alienated millions of people who could have been fans if I had just been more like Matt Drudge. Look at Matt Drudge. His audience, he starts in the fucking early 90s with his website. He's like the mollusk media, the middle man, missing link media figure. He's exactly that, because he starts his own sort of independent firm. It's a business, but he himself is fully independent. It's Matt Drudge does whatever he wants, the website. Glenn Beck looks over at him and says, wow, he started earlier than me, had a smaller audience than my starting audience, and I had this big slot at Fox and was really famous. And yet look at him, he's like 10 times the size that I am. Fuck, I made a mistake. I made a big mistake. Now I've got to go over and pretend that I've seen the light and that I realize Donald Trump is Jesus elect. That's what Glenn Beck did. Didn't work out so well, did it, Glenn? As for the media in general, the Salon had to downsize. Look, they're all downsizing. The missing link media's actually got it worse than like the true legacy media of cable or old newsprint. At least they've got a legacy that can span back for decades, sometimes over 100 years. You know, the New York Times, the LA Times or something. Some of them have made better transition to the online world than others. Some of them are more socially interactive than others. That's why they want to censor the internet so people like me can interact as well, because they don't want to. They don't want to be bothered. Head of New York Times, he doesn't want to have to answer people's DMs. They're too good for us little alt-tech people. But then you look at the missing link media, and it's like, well, Salon is dying. They had to downsize already. The Blaze is dying. This comes from the Daily Beast. It's like, okay, well, you're a partisan network, but yeah, it is true. The Blaze, who uses it anymore? When they first exist, like years and years ago, when the Blaze first formed, I can remember if you looked like, you know, on any big tech firm, you'd see them referenced constantly. Now, it's been a while since anyone linked me something from the Blaze, honestly. It's the same as like Salon. Even in the last year, they've fallen on some very hard times. They seem to have fallen largely out of favor with people that were parroting them over and over. BuzzFeed and Vox are the ones that are, I guess, surviving as far as the missing link media goes. And then Breitbart on the other side. They're doing better than the Blaze. They've got their own fucking problems. At least they've got Steve Bannon back. Glenn Beck, the problem with him is that he boils everything down to his extremely narrow set of talents, which is essentially rambling about religion and rambling about conspiracy Soros sort of stuff. That's all well and good because sometimes George Soros does really underhanded stuff, but that one subject isn't enough to build an entire news site, even if it does only have a few dozen employees. You know, they had millions and millions in income, and now all of a sudden they're risking non-existence. It really is like, so I guess Salon and the Blaze will be the first casualties from the missing link media. Who follows then? Well, people who are regulars there will gravitate to other firms and they'll help buoy them up. This is what's happening in cable media. You got to understand something. When Fox or MSNBC, they say, well, our ratings rose. That's because a third of CNN's audience abandoned them and they went to Fox and MSNBC. You are cannibalizing people that were already part of the ever-shrinking pool of cable news viewers. You didn't add anybody new. More cable news viewers are dying than being born. Many people from Gen Z, they don't even watch TV. They don't even have access to watching TV. Nobody watches cable. Like half of millennials don't watch cable. Gen X, the TV generation, only like 2/3 of them watch cable. Tens of millions of them have abandoned them. As for newsprint, I can't think of anybody in my age range that has a newspaper subscription. It's like my parents do. They buy the newspaper. They don't really like get it delivered and go out and buy it for the sports section of the cartoons. It's like, here, let me introduce you to a wonderful thing. All of these cartoonists put their stuff on independent websites. You can go all sorts of places where they'll collate it for you. And there's a million other cartoonists that are better than anything other than Jim Davis. I like Garfield. All the others are totally expendable as far as I'm concerned. Jim Davis does it best. Best cartoonist in history. Other than Ben Garrison, maybe. Yeah, that's the way sorry, Glenn, but you made the transition to the online world a little bit too late. And then you attempted to take what essentially was your actual talent, which is being a TV persona, and export that to the internet. That doesn't work so well. For those of us who were here to begin with, I was never on a cable show or on radio, it's way easier. I think radio people have it easier because at least an audio version podcast, they can do that and it's the same thing. Like even Bill O'Reilly, he's kind of made the transition. Even if he only has a few tens of thousands of people buying his subscription, he's still making 5 figures a month, dude. He's making a lot of money. Glenn Beck, he'll be lucky if he still has a company in a few years. I take extreme pleasure in knowing that that's the case. That's about all. Peace out.